I think there's a nice update as of right now when it comes to Zebec. And what is that? Not too long ago, Zebec made a post on X and it was showcasing their newest compliance advisors. And let's talk about this because, for instance, when it comes to this, the first individual they mention is Dr. Mark Turkington, and allegedly he's the head of AML and transaction monitoring at HSBC. HSBC is very massive, so I think that right there is something that I find very interesting. And the fact that like Zebec is even focused on compliance, I think it kind of showcases their long-term mindset, and I think it kind of solidifies itself as a project that is kind of treating this seriously as opposed to something that is kind of you know, just taking it for fun, if that makes sense. But even besides that, the second individual they mention is Wojtek Satorsky. And I actually talked about, Wojtek in one of my previous videos. And again, he is the co-founder of GateKnox, which allegedly by Zebec acquiring that not too long ago, they were kind of like showcasing how they were, being focused on compliance through that because you have to take a look at GateKnox, right? GateKnox is allegedly AI-powered KYC for Web3. So that's very amazing. And again, KYC stands for Know Your Customer. So I just kind of think that Zebec is heading in the right direction. But again, I already talked about Wojtek and GateKnox in my previous videos. But let's talk about the third individual that they do mention here, and that right there is Nick Andrews. And I think what's so special about Nick is that was the ex-Wells Fargo director. And allegedly, again, he has decades in banking, experience and whatnot. So I think this hypothetically is very fantastic. Other projects out there, they don't even want to do this. They'd rather just kind of focus their energy, their effort to advertising with, celebrities, athletes. And in some cases, it's going to depend on kind of the mentality of the project because some projects out there may find that, good for them, while others, something like Zebec, I think kind of focuses on other aspects. Like, for instance, actually kind of developing their fundamentals as opposed to gaining attention, but then the fundamentals aren't really there yet. So this is what I like about it. I think it's a pretty nice update because the way I take a look at it is that Zebec is at least kind of showcasing stuff like this to the community. Some other projects out there that I see, they don't really want to showcase it. They just kind of want to keep it, kind of hidden for whatever reason. But I like how Zebec is kind of showcasing this. And I do like it because, again, projects out there, if they want to survive for the long term, I think being focused on compliance, I think if anything, hypothetically, I do find that as a good thing. People like to say, oh man, when it comes to something like Zebec, they think it's just like a watered down version of Ripple or Stellar, but I kind of view it in a different way because we have to take a look at Zebec's somewhat close ties to Solana. ZBCN not too long ago was a top 10 in terms of utility when it comes to Solana. I think that is very impressive because we have to consider how massive Solana is, how many projects it has, and again, not too long ago, ZBCN top 10 in terms of utility. I think that is very impressive. And we have to take a look at kind of the bullish sentiment that is surrounding Solana. For instance, what could the Solana ETF in Canada hypothetically bring to the future of Solana? Only time will tell, but I'm very excited when it comes to that. Not to mention, we have to take a look at as well. Solana is kind of beginning to be recognized as one of these layer 1 blockchains that can kind of somewhat compete with like an Ethereum, for instance. So I like the direction in which, again, it's heading there. And as Solana gains a lot more attention, would it be fair to assume that maybe, ZBCN could hypothetically go along with the ride? I don't see why not. Zebec is also focused on payrolls. And keep in mind as well, not too long ago, when it comes to Zebec, they made a post on X and it was kind of showcasing how they were kind of talking about the $11 trillion payroll, market, quite essentially, something along those lines. And I think that right there kind of really puts it into perspective that, you know what, when it comes to something like Zebec, being focused on payrolls isn't necessarily such a bad thing. When it comes to Zebec's kind of like payroll, statistics, so to speak, not too long ago, at least it was reported, for this year in May, that there was 227 enterprise clients. So just let that sink in. That's very impressive, in my opinion. And their payroll volume was allegedly like around $40 million monthly, again, in the month of May. So I kind of view Zebec as it's not necessarily the biggest or most famous project out there because, come on, it's not, right? But then at the same time, I like how it's at least doing something and the adoption isn't bad for kind of the recognition that it has because I think despite the exposure and kind of like the relatively speaking non-mainstream hype for Zebec, it's been able to kind of do a lot in spite of that, which I find very impressive. This kind of has the traits in which I've seen, historically speaking, some projects have gone on to do very well. Like in a sense that usually it comes down to 3 traits in my opinion. good perceived fundamentals, good community, and good exchange listings. And I think Zebec kind of ticks those boxes. Like, for instance, I think arguably the fundamentals are very good. Again, that's just my opinion. We take a look at the community. I think it's pretty solid. I think it has the passion, has the drive. Again, it may not have the kind of like, I would say numbers of like a Ripple or Stellar, but then it still kind of has that passion, and I like that. Not to mention, exchange listings are pretty good. Like, I'm not going to say it's the best because it's not, but then I kind of still like it. So in theory, when I take a look at all that type of stuff, 10 cents, would it surprise me? If let's say it were to go to that price, even though nothing I say is financial advice, considering current circulating supply, market cap would be around $8.5 billion, around a 26x from here. ZBCN has had a pretty big pullback, but I'm still optimistic because I don't view it as like an outlandish market cap. I mean, Dogecoin years ago, back in 2021, was able to reach over $80 billion in market cap. And granted, ZBCN is never going to be as famous as Dogecoin, in my opinion, but then achieving a glimpse of that, like, that wouldn't surprise me. But again, ultimately, I'm just going to stay patient because that is the only thing I can control. But in the meantime, I'm going to focus on the updates when it comes to Zebec, focus on the fundamentals, because while waiting for hypothetically the markets to do very good when it comes to altcoins, I'm just going to stay patient, just continue my journey, and just continue what I've been doing ever since the beginning. In a sense that in the beginning, I was just dollar cost averaging, holding, and just waiting. And I'm going to still continue to do that. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. It's been Lee the Captain, and I'll catch you all in the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.